Melinda pushed through the rain with Mateo limp against her shoulder, his little body burning with fever again. 2 nights without real sleep, 2 shifts lost, 1 eviction warning taped to her door. The storm didn't care. It slashed sideways across the avenue, turning every puddle into a mirror of neon and despair. She shifted the toddler higher, his damp curls plastered to her neck, and checked her phone with freezing fingers. No new messages. The urgent care bill was already 3 days overdue, and her last $20 had gone to the pharmacy 2 hours ago. Bus fare home? Not tonight. Across the street, golden lights spilled from a café. She always hurried past marble counters, single origin pour-overs, the kind of place where 1 coffee cost more than her hourly wage used to be. Normally she'd rather stand in the rain than walk in there broke and dripping. Tonight wasn't normal. She shoved the door open with her hip. Heat and the smell of dark roast hit her like a slap of luxury. The room was packed, every table claimed, every chair taken. Only one man sat alone near the window, immaculate black suit untouched by the weather, a Canon R5 with a red ring lens resting on the table like it was just another accessory. He hadn't touched the espresso in front of him. Melinda swallowed the last of her pride and walked over, boots squelching. "Excuse me," she said, voice barely above the rain hammering the glass. "Would you mind if we sat here? Everywhere else is full." He looked up slowly. Eyes, the color of winter river ice, traveled over her soaked hair, the way Mateo's small fists clutched her sweater, the tremor she couldn't hide in her arms. Something unreadable flickered across his face. Recognition, decision, possession, all in a single heartbeat. "Sit," he said, the single word soft, precise, lightly accented. Then, after a pause that stretched too long, "But you're not leaving after." It wasn't kindness. It was a verdict. A barista appeared before she'd even pulled the chair out, towels materializing, a second chair dragged over without being asked. "Hot milk with honey for the boy," the man said without looking away from her. "And congee plain, warm." Quickly. "Right away, Mr. Wang," the barista answered, bowing slightly as he backed off. Melinda blinked. She hadn't ordered anything. She couldn't afford anything. "I can pay," she started. "Already handled." Mateo stirred at the warmth of the room, lifting his head just enough to peek at the stranger. The man, Vernon, though she didn't know that yet, watched the boy with an intensity that made the air feel suddenly thinner. "I'm Melinda," she offered weakly. "This is my son, Mateo." "Vernon Wang," he said, as if the name should mean something. It didn't. Not yet. The congee arrived in under a minute, steam curling up like mercy. Mateo reached for the spoon with both hands, and for the first time in 2 days, color crept back into his cheeks. Melinda wrapped shaking fingers around her own cup on the house, apparently, and glanced at the window. The storm still raged, angry and endless. Vernon Wang watched mother and child with the stillness of a predator who had already chosen his territory. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, something irreversible had already begun. Melinda's fingers had only just stopped shaking around the warm cup when Mateo's head lolled heavier against her chest. The congee and hot milk had done their work. His breathing had evened out, the fever flush fading into the soft slack of real sleep. She shifted him carefully, afraid the slightest jolt would wake him and bring the coughing back. Across the small table, Vernon Wang hadn't moved. He sat perfectly still, elbows on the arms of his chair, long fingers steepled, watching the boy with an expression she couldn't name. Not curiosity. Not pity. Something hungrier and far more dangerous. Mateo shivered in his sleep, a small, involuntary tremor that cut Melinda deeper than the rain ever had. Without a word, Vernon stood. The movement was fluid, almost soundless. He slipped out of his suit jacket, black cashmere so fine it looked liquid in the low light, and leaned over the table. For one suspended second, she thought he was reaching for her. Instead, he draped the jacket gently, carefully, over Mateo's small body, tucking it around the boy like a blanket. The sleeve swallowed Mateo whole, the hem pooled on the floor. It smelled faintly of cedar and something sharper, like gun oil and winter air. Melinda's throat closed. No one touched her son without permission. And yet the gesture was so impossibly tender she couldn't find the words to protest. Vernon's knuckles brushed Mateo's curls once, almost reverent, before he straightened and sat again, as if he hadn't just shattered something inside her with a single act of kindness. "Thank you," she whispered. It came out cracked. He inclined his head, the smallest acknowledgement, then lifted one hand. The same barista appeared so fast he might have been waiting in the shadows. "My driver is outside," Vernon said. Not to the barista, to her. "He'll take you home." The words landed between them like a gauntlet. We're fine. The rain will let up soon. I can." "No." Quiet, final. "You will not carry him through that storm again." Melinda glanced at the window. Water still sheeted down the glass in unbroken rivers. The clock above the counter read 11:47 p.m. The last bus had stopped running an hour ago. She had exactly $2.37 in change at the bottom of her bag and a sleeping toddler who weighed 32 pounds. She didn't have the strength to carry another 10 blocks. She hated how quickly her pride crumbled. "It's really not necessary." She tried one last time. Vernon's eyes flicked to Mateo, then back to her. Something dark and immovable lived in that look. "It is necessary," he said. "To me." There was no arguing with that tone. She had heard it before from landlords, from social workers, from doctors delivering bad news. The tone that said the decision had already been made, and her opinion was irrelevant. She stood on legs that felt borrowed. Vernon rose with her, towering now that he was on his feet. 6'3", maybe 6'4", broad through the shoulders in a way the perfect cut of his white shirt only emphasized. He lifted Mateo from her arms as if the boy weighed nothing, settling him against his own chest with the same care he'd shown the jacket. Mateo never stirred. Melinda followed him out into the storm like a woman walking to her own execution. A black Maybach waited at the curb, engine purring low. Wipers sweeping in perfect rhythm. The driver, a tall man in a charcoal suit, earpiece visible, opened the rear door before Vernon even reached the car. Rain glanced off the roof and rolled away like it didn't dare cling. Vernon slid in first, still cradling Mateo, and only then reached to help her inside. His hand closed around hers, warm, dry, unbreakable. The door shut with a soft, expensive thunk that sealed the world outside. The interior smelled like new leather and money. Heated seats bloomed warmth through her wet jeans. Soft classical piano drifted from hidden speakers, something in minor key that felt like a warning. Mateo sighed in his sleep and burrowed closer to Vernon's chest, one small fist curling into the front of the white shirt. Vernon's arm curved protectively around him without seeming to think about it. "Where to?" the driver asked in careful, accented English. Melinda rattled off the address in East Harlem, cheeks burning. 118th and Lexington. The kind of block where Maybachs didn't idle, even at midnight. The partition rose silently between front and back seats, leaving them in a cocoon of amber light and rain noise. She should say something. Thank you, maybe. Or demand to know why a stranger was holding her son like he belonged to him. Instead, she stared at her hands twisted in her lap and tried to remember the last time anyone had carried Mateo so she didn't have to. "You are cold," Vernon said quietly. "I'm fine." He reached over and adjusted the climate control anyway. Hot air whispered across her skin. The silence stretched, thick and strange. Every few seconds, her eyes darted to Mateo, making sure he was breathing, making sure this wasn't some fever dream born of exhaustion. Finally, she found her voice. "Why are you doing this?" Vernon didn't answer immediately. He was looking down at Mateo's sleeping face, thumb brushing almost imperceptibly across the boy's temple. "Because I can," he said at last. Simple, terrifying. The car slid through the city like a shark through dark water, red lights parting without the driver ever touching the brake. Melinda watched familiar streets blur past and felt reality tilting. She tried again. People don't just do this. Not for strangers. His gaze lifted to hers. In the low light, his eyes looked black. "Tonight, you are not a stranger." The words settled in her stomach like stones. They reached her building far too quickly. 5 stories of peeling paint and buzzing security gates that hadn't worked since Obama's first term. The Maybach looked obscene under the flickering streetlight. The driver opened her door. Cool, wet air rushed in. Vernon stepped out first, still carrying Mateo. Rain dotted his white shirt instantly, turning the fabric translucent across his chest and shoulders. He didn't seem to notice. "I can take him now," she said, reaching. He didn't release the boy. Instead, he started toward the entrance, forcing her to hurry after him. The lobby smelled of old grease and bleach. One fluorescent tube flickered overhead like a dying insect. Vernon's presence filled the cramped space until the walls seemed to shrink. "Keys," he said. She fumbled them out, hands clumsy. He took them from her, unlocked the security door with one hand, and held it open so she could pass. Then he followed her up the narrow stairs 4 flights because the elevator had been broken since June. At her door, 3B, paint chipped, eviction notice still taped there like a scarlet letter. She tried one last time. "Really? Thank you. For everything. But we're home now." Vernon ignored her. He waited while she unlocked the deadbolt, then stepped inside first, eyes sweeping the tiny apartment in one practiced motion. Kitchenette, single bedroom, visible through the half-open door, couch that pulled out into her bed. Everything she owned fit into 400 square feet and still looked cluttered. Only when he was satisfied did he gently, carefully, lay Mateo down on the couch. He pulled off the boy's damp shoes, tugged the cashmere jacket higher around small shoulders, and stood back. Melinda hovered, useless. Vernon turned to her. For the first time, she noticed the faint shadow of exhaustion under his eyes, the only human thing about him tonight. "You will lock the door behind me," he said. "Both locks. The chain. All 3. She nodded, mute. He reached into his pocket, produced a matte black business card, thick stock, no logo, just a phone number embossed in silver, and pressed it into her hand. "If you need anything," he said. "Anything, you call." His fingers lingered against hers a second longer than necessary. Then he was gone. She locked the doors twice, 3 times slid the chain, and leaned her forehead against the wood until her breathing slowed. Only then did she notice he'd left the cashmere jacket draped over her sleeping son. Across the city, in a penthouse that took up the entire top floor of a Soho tower, Vernon Wang stood at the wall of glass and watched the storm tear itself apart over the skyline. His driver, Chen, waited at a respectful distance. "Find out everything," Vernon said without turning. Melinda B. Ruiz. Age, family, debts, medical records, employment history. The boy Mateo, his father, paternity, health, everything. Chen inclined his head. "Yes, Shejing." Vernon's reflection stared back at him, white shirt soaked and clinging, a child's small handprint still visible on the fabric where Mateo had clutched him. He touched the damp spot with 2 fingers, almost wondering. Then the mask slid back into place, cold and perfect. But inside, something that had been dead for 23 years stirred and opened its eyes. The morning came in gray and unforgiving. Melinda woke on the pull-out couch with Mateo's fever-warm body curled against her chest and the faint scent of expensive cashmere still clinging to the boy's skin. For one disoriented second, she thought the night before had been a dream, the café, the storm, the man with winter eyes. Then, she saw Vernon Wang's jacket folded neatly on the chair. Mateo's tiny shoes lined up beneath it like someone had cared enough to make the gesture perfect. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Unknown number. She almost let it ring out. Hello? Miss Ruiz. The same driver from last night, voice low and careful. Mr. Wang instructed me to wait downstairs. The car is warm. The boy should not walk in this weather. She flew to the window, yanked the blinds. There it was. The black Maybach, hazard lights blinking through leftover rain puddles. That won't be necessary, she said automatically. A pause. Mr. Wang was very clear, miss. The boy is still coughing. As if on cue, Mateo hacked against her collarbone wet, barking, the sound that had kept her awake half the night. She closed her eyes. 5 minutes later, she was buckling Mateo into a car seat that had definitely not been in the Maybach yesterday. The leather was butter soft and already warmed. A brand new stuffed panda sat waiting in the corner, brown eyes, red ribbon, price tag discreetly removed. From Mr. Wang, the driver said, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. For the little one. Mateo clutched the panda like it was oxygen. They didn't head toward the daycare. The car turned south, gliding through traffic that parted for it the way water parts for a blade. Where are we going? Melinda asked, voice thin. Mr. Wang has arranged temporary work for you. Administrative, good pay, flexible hours. A polite smile. He thought it would be easier than searching for something new while Mateo recovers. She should have demanded they turn around. Instead, she sat silent, fingers knotted in her lap, watching Harlem give way to Midtown's glass towers. The building was anonymous, 43 stories of mirrored black glass, no company name above the door, just a discreet brass plaque. Wang Global Logistics. The lobby smelled like money and ozone. 2 men in charcoal suits straightened the moment the revolving door spun her through. Miss Ruiz, one said, inclining his head. This way. Mateo, still clutching the panda, waved shyly at the security cameras. They took a private elevator to the 39th floor. The doors opened onto an open-plan office that looked normal enough, rows of desks, ringing phones, the low hum of printers until she noticed no one was speaking above a murmur, and every single person stood when the elevator dinged. A woman in a dove-gray sheath dress approached, tablet in hand. Mr. Wang is in a meeting. He asked me to get you settled. I'm Lynn. She crouched to Mateo's level. And who is this handsome gentleman? Mateo hid behind Melinda's legs but peeked out, panda first. Lynn's smile was practiced perfection. We have a quiet corner office ready for you, Miss Ruiz. Simple data entry, invoice matching, nothing strenuous. And a play area for Mateo just through there. She gestured to a glass door where soft rugs, toys, and a mini fridge waited like someone had built a high-end daycare overnight. Melinda's mouth opened, closed. How did he? Mr. Wang is very efficient, Lynn said, as if that explained everything. The first day passed in a blur of color-coded spreadsheets and Mateo napping on a mountain of pillows while Disney played on a wall-mounted screen. The pay stub printed at 5 p.m. made her choke 2 weeks' worth of her old housekeeping wages for 8 hours of clicking boxes. At 5:17, the elevator opened and Vernon Wang walked out. He had changed into a midnight blue suit that cost more than her annual rent. The office went still. Phones paused mid-ring. He didn't acknowledge anyone. His eyes found her across the floor like lasers. Melinda stood, smoothing her secondhand blouse, suddenly aware of every frayed thread. Melinda. Just her name, but it rolled through the room like a command. Mateo spotted him first. "Vern!" he shrieked, toddling out from the play area, arms up. Vernon froze mid-step. Every person in the room seemed to stop breathing. Mateo reached him, latched onto a perfectly pressed pant leg, and beamed upward. Up. For one heartbeat, Vernon's mask slipped something raw and aching flashed across his face. Then it was gone. He bent, lifted Mateo as naturally as if he'd done it 1,000 times, settling the boy on his hip. "Little tiger," he murmured in English, then something softer in Cantonese that made Mateo giggle. Melinda's heart stuttered. "You don't have to." Vernon's eyes met hers over Mateo's curls. "The car is waiting." That was the beginning. The days blurred into a rhythm she never asked for and couldn't bring herself to refuse. Every morning, the Maybach appeared at 7:45 sharp. Some days Vernon was in the back seat reading the Financial Times. Some days it was just the driver and a new toy for Mateo. Either way, they were delivered to the 39th floor where her inbox waited, perfectly organized, and Mateo's play area had been refreshed with books or Legos or a train set that cost more than her couch. She learned the shape of Vernon's world in fragments. The way conversations died when she entered a room. The way men twice her size stepped aside in hallways, eyes lowered. The way Vernon's voice could drop half an octave and entire floors went silent. She learned he spoke 4 languages fluently: English, Mandarin, Cantonese, and something harsher she thought might be Russian, and switched between them without effort. She learned he never ate lunch at his desk. Food simply appeared: dim sum, sushi, lobster rolls, always enough for her and Mateo too. And she learned Mateo adored him. It terrified her. The boy who flinched at raised voices would spot Vernon across a lobby and bolt, arms outstretched. Vernon always caught him. Always. Even the afternoon, he stepped out of a meeting covered in someone else's blood, just a few drops on his cuff, gone 10 seconds later beneath a crisp white replacement shirt. He knelt first so Mateo could hug him without seeing. Melinda saw. That was the first real crack. She had been sent to his office with a stack of corrected invoices. The door was ajar. She heard voices low, urgent Mandarin. She caught only one word, repeated like a curse. "Shijing." "Boss." Vernon's tone turned to ice. Whatever he said next made the other man go pale and start bowing, backing toward the door. Melinda stepped aside just in time. The man nearly ran her over, muttering apologies, sweat beading on his forehead. When she entered, Vernon was already composed, rolling down fresh sleeves. "Everything all right?" she asked, careful. He glanced up. "A discrepancy. It is handled." That night she Googled Shijing on her ancient laptop and felt her stomach drop through the floor. Triad boss. The next afternoon she cornered him in the private elevator. Mateo was at daycare for an hour. Lynn had insisted, so they were alone. "Are you in the Mafia?" she asked, voice shaking. The elevator hummed between floors. Vernon looked at her for a long moment. "You should not worry about what I am," he said finally, softly. "Only that I will never harm you or the boy." "That's not an answer." "It is the only one that matters." The doors opened on the parking garage. 2 men in dark suits straightened to attention. "From now on," Vernon continued, "you will have escorts after dark. They will drive you home. Wait outside. You will not walk alone anymore." "No." The word burst out of her. "I'm not some kept woman. I have a life." "Your life," he cut in, stepping close enough that she smelled cedar and gunpowder again, "almost ended in a rainstorm because you had no choices. That will not happen again." He reached past her, pressed the button to hold the doors open. "Melinda." "Quieter now. I am not asking." She wanted to fight. wanted to scream that she didn't belong to him. But the memory of carrying Mateo fevered through the rain stopped her cold. The escorts started the next day. She hated them. She needed them. Office gossip traveled in whispers. That's the woman Mr. Wang protects. No one touches her, not ever. Even the old guard from Vancouver, they bow when she passes. Melinda heard it all and pretended not to. Then Jared came back. She was locking her apartment door, juggling Mateo and groceries the escorts had carried up, when he stepped out of the stairwell reeking of cheap whiskey and worse intentions. Mel. His voice slick with fake affection. Look at you. New clothes, new friends. His gaze slid to the two silent men behind her. Heard you're moving up in the world. Leave, Jared. Can't. Need to see my son. He lunged for Mateo. The nearest guard moved so fast she barely saw it. Jared's arm twisted behind his back, face slammed against the wall, a muffled scream cut short. Hands off the child, the guard said in perfect English. Jared spat blood. You can't. The second guard's phone was already out. 30 seconds later Vernon was there. How? She never knew. Suit, immaculate, eyes promising murder. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Jared was on his knees, whimpering, while Vernon crouched to Mateo's level and asked in the gentlest tone she'd ever heard. Did he scare you, little tiger? Mateo shook his head, but his lip trembled. Vernon straightened. The temperature in the hallway seemed to plummet 20 degrees. You will sign away all rights, he told Jared, conversational. My lawyers will bring the papers tomorrow. You will disappear from their lives. If you ever come within 10 blocks of this building, this city, this state. He smiled. It was the most frightening thing Melinda had ever seen. They will never find enough of you to bury. Jared pissed himself. She smelled it. Vernon didn't look at him again. He lifted Mateo into his arms, pressed a kiss to the boy's curls, and only then turned to her. Are you hurt? She couldn't speak, could only shake her head. That night, in the back of the Maybach, while Mateo slept against Vernon's chest, he spoke so quietly she almost missed it. No one will take him from you. His fingers stroked Mateo's hair with heartbreaking care. I will not allow it. There was something in his voice, old grief, fresh terror that made her chest ache. Why does it matter so much to you? She whispered. He was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because I know what it is to lose a little boy with those eyes. He didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. Outside, the city lights blurred past, and Melinda understood for the first time that whatever this was, protection, obsession, salvation, it had roots deeper and darker than she could ever dig up alone. She was in his orbit now. And orbits, once entered, do not let go. The night it all cracked open started with blood on Vernon's cuffs. Melinda had stayed late at the office finishing month-end reports that no one else seemed willing to touch. Mateo was asleep in the playroom, curled on the wide leather sofa with the panda tucked under his chin and Vernon's cashmere jacket, now permanently on loan, draped over him like a royal cloak. The guards had texted that they were posted outside the private elevator. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. She found him on the 42nd floor, the executive level no one used after 8 unless something had gone very wrong. The lights were low, only the city glow bleeding through floor-to-ceiling glass. Vernon stood at the window, back to the door, shoulders rigid. His white shirt was untucked on one side, the French cuffs unbuttoned and rolled. Dark arterial spray patterned the front in a violent constellation. Not his blood, she knew that instantly, because he was standing too straight, breathing too evenly. But his hands were shaking. Melinda had never seen them shake. She closed the door softly behind her. The click echoed like a gunshot. He didn't turn. Go home, Melinda. His voice was raw, scraped down to the bone. I'm not leaving you like this. A humorless sound left his throat. You have no idea what like this looks like. She crossed the room slowly, the way you approach a wounded wolf that could still rip your throat out. When she reached him, she saw the rest. Split knuckles, swelling already blooming purple across the ridges, a thin line of crimson trickling from his hairline. Someone had fought back. Someone had lost. Let me see, she said, reaching for his right hand. For a moment, she thought he would pull away. Instead, he let her take it, let her turn the palm up, let her trace the torn skin with careful fingers. His hand was ice. You're freezing, she whispered. I'm fine. You're lying. She tugged him toward the small wet bar tucked into the corner, found the first aid kit Lynn kept fully stocked, because of course she did. Antiseptic, gauze, butterfly closures. She worked in silence, cleaning the splits, wrapping the worst knuckles. Vernon watched her face instead of his hands, eyes black in the half-light. When she finished, she didn't let go. Tell me, she said. He laughed once, a sound like breaking glass. You already know what I am. I know what people say. I want what you say. His gaze dropped to their joined hands. Something inside him seemed to collapse all at once, the perfect posture, the iron control. He leaned back against the window, forehead pressing to the cool glass, and spoke so quietly she had to step closer to hear. His name was Kai. The name hung between them like incense. He was 4. Same curls, same eyes, same way of saying my name Gege when he wanted to be carried. Vernon's voice cracked on the childhood word for big brother. We were in Kowloon Market. 1 minute he was holding my hand, the next, gone. They took him to send a message to my father. 3 days later, the police found what was left. Melinda's breath stopped. I was 9. He continued, merciless. Old enough to understand that my father chose territory over blood. Old enough to swear I would never make that choice. He turned then, finally facing her fully. The city lights carved harsh shadows across his cheekbones, the blood on his shirt, a brutal accusation. Every time I look at Mateo, his throat worked. It's like Kai never left. And like he was stolen all over again. Every single day. The confession broke something open in the room, years of concrete and steel and rage, until the air itself felt too thin. Melinda didn't think. She simply stepped into him, wrapped her arms around his waist, and held on. For a long second he was statue still. Then his arms came around her with crushing force, face burying in her hair, body shaking with the kind of sobs that have no sound. She felt the damp of tears against her scalp and realized the most feared man in 3 continents was crying in her arms. Minutes or hours later, he never knew he pulled back just enough to see her face. His thumbs brushed her cheeks, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I tried to stay away from you both, he rasped. I told myself 1 ride home. 1 job. 1 month and you'd be safe enough to leave. But I can't. I look at him and I see the brother I couldn't save. I look at you and I see the only person who has ever made the world quiet. His forehead dropped to hers. Stay with me, he whispered. You and the boy stay with me. You are safer with me than anywhere else on earth. I swear it on Kai's grave. Melinda's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. This was the line. The irrevocable one. Cross it and there was no going back to the woman who carried her sick child through the rain. She crossed it anyway. Her hand slid up his chest, careful of the blood, and cupped his face. I'm not going anywhere. The kiss was not gentle. It was 23 years of grief and terror and loneliness crashing into 3 months of restraint. His mouth claimed hers like a man dying of thirst, desperate and reverent at once. She kissed him back the same way, fierce, messy, honest. He lifted her onto the conference table without breaking contact, hands sliding under her blouse, mapping skin like he was memorizing a country he never thought he'd be allowed to enter. They didn't make it to a bed. Clothes scattered across Italian leather chairs. The city watched through the glass as Vernon Wang took her apart with his mouth and put her back together with whispered promises in 3 languages. When he finally sank into her, it felt like surrender and victory at the same time. She wrapped her legs around him and held on as he moved like a man trying to crawl inside her soul and live there forever. Afterward, they lay tangled on the wide leather couch in his office, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy circles on her bare back. "I love you," he said into the dark. Simple. Terrifying. True. She pressed a kiss over his heart. "I know." They fell asleep like that blood-stained shirt discarded on the floor, city lights painting them in gold and indigo. Neither of them heard the phones start to explode. The abduction happened 3 nights later. Melinda had moved into the penthouse 2 days earlier, Vernon's quiet, non-negotiable announcement after the night on the 42nd floor. She told herself it was temporary. The walk-in closet full of new clothes in her size and the nursery that had appeared overnight for Mateo suggested otherwise. That evening Vernon was late. Some meeting in Flushing that couldn't be moved. He'd kissed them both goodbye with extra thoroughness, murmuring against her mouth that he'd be home by 10. At 9:47, the doorman buzzed up. "Package for Miss Ruiz. Needs signature." She was alone. Vernon had doubled the usual security, but the 2 guards were posted in the hall, not inside the apartment. She thought nothing of walking to the private elevator in yoga pants and one of Vernon's shirts. The doors slid open. 4 men in black tactical gear poured out before she could scream. The first one backhanded her so hard her vision whited out. She tasted blood. The second grabbed her hair and slammed her face first into the marble floor. "Mommy!" Mateo's terrified cry cut through the ringing in her ears. She fought like a wild animal, nails raking faces, teeth sinking into a wrist, knees and elbows everywhere. She got one of them in the throat, heard him choke, but there were too many. A gloved hand clamped over her mouth, needle-sharp prick in her neck. The world started to swim. Through blurring vision, she saw Mateo kicking and screaming as a man lifted him. "No." It came out slurred. "Take me, not him. Please." The last thing she saw was Mateo reaching for her over a masked shoulder, mouth open in a silent wail as the elevator doors closed. Then nothing. Vernon came home to silence and blood on the marble. He knew the moment the private elevator opened on the penthouse floor. The metallic smell hit him first, then the overturned chair, the smear of red where Melinda's cheek had hit the floor. The guards were dead in the hallway, throats cut clean, earpieces still blinking. He stepped over their bodies without feeling his feet touch the ground. Melinda. Her name left him like a prayer and a curse. She was on the living room rug, just starting to stir, pupils blown wide from whatever they'd dosed her with. When she saw him, she tried to stand and collapsed again, reaching for him with shaking hands. "They took him," she rasped. "They took Mateo." Something ancient and lethal ignited behind Vernon's eyes. He caught her as she fell forward, cradling her against his chest while his mind went terrifyingly, perfectly still. "Shezing." Chin's voice behind him, breathless from running up 40 flights when the elevators locked down. "We have footage. Black vans, no plates. They went south on the bridge. Red Lotus markers." Red Lotus. The faction that had taken Kai all those years ago. The ones he'd spent 2 decades burning out of existence, root and branch. They had come for his heart a second time. Vernon laid Melinda gently on the couch, pressed a kiss to her forehead that tasted of salt and terror. "Stay here," he told her. "Lock the doors. No one in or out until I come back." She clutched his sleeve, nails digging in. Bring him home." "I will," he said. The promise was quiet, absolute, and terrible. "Or I will burn the city down around his ears." Then he turned away, and the man disappeared. In his place stood the dragon. The change was instantaneous and absolute. Shoulders squared, face smoothed into something colder than death. He walked to the elevator like a man going to war, and every guard in the lobby snapped to attention without a word. Chen was already on the phone, voice-clipped Mandarin streaming orders, thermal drones over the harbor, safe houses raided, every Red Lotus soldier in the 5 boroughs dragged in for questioning. Vernon didn't speak. He simply pulled on tactical gloves, checked the magazine in his custom 1911, and slid a second into his waistband. His voice, when it came, was winter-given sound. "Find my son." Within 20 minutes, half the underworld was mobilized, men who owed him blood debts, informants who feared his shadow, hackers who could track a ghost through the dark web. Drones lifted off rooftops. Black SUVs screamed through red lights. Safe houses that had stood for decades began to burn. Vernon stood in the war room beneath the Soho Tower, watching live feeds flicker across a dozen screens, and felt nothing but the steady, lethal beat of purpose. Melinda watched from the doorway, wrapped in his discarded jacket, and finally understood. He wasn't merely dangerous. He was the storm contained inside a man. And tonight, the storm was coming for her baby. The war room beneath the Soho Tower smelled of gun oil and ozone. 30 screens bled red and green, thermal blooms, street cam feeds, drone overwatch, encrypted chatter scrolling in Mandarin, Cantonese, and Russian. The air itself felt pressurized, like the moment before lightning strikes. Vernon stood at the center in matte black tactical gear, the white shirt and silk suits burned away with the man who had worn them. A dragon coiled in gold thread across his chest plate, the only color in the room. His face was a blade. Chen slid a tablet across the steel table. 3 probable locations. Red Lotus moved the boy to the old canning plant in Red Hook. Heat signatures show 26 bodies, 1 child, sized. They're waiting for you to come alone. Vernon's smile was small and terrible. Then we will not disappoint them. He turned to the room 40 of his best, ghosts who had bled for him from Macau to Vancouver, and spoke in the voice that ended empires. Rules are simple. Anyone who laid a hand on the child dies tonight. Anyone who looked at him and did nothing dies tonight. The rest can beg. I am not in a merciful mood. A ripple went through the men. Not fear, but hunger. Melinda stood in the doorway wrapped in one of Vernon's black hoodies, sleeves swallowing her hands, barefoot because she had refused the body armor. Her cheek was purple-black from the abduction, lips split and crusted. She looked half-drowned in grief and fury. "You are not leaving me behind," she said. It was not a request. Vernon crossed the room in 3 strides. "Melinda. If you make me wait here, I will find my own way there, and I will burn that building down with my bare hands." Her voice didn't shake. "He is my son." Something ancient and proud flickered in Vernon's eyes. He cupped her bruised face with gloved hands, thumb brushing the split in her lip like it personally offended him. "Then you ride with me," he said. "But you stay at my side, you do not leave it. Swear it." "I swear." He kissed her once hard, brief, tasting of gunpowder and promises, then handed her a compact Glock 43 and a ballistic vest small enough to be custom. Someone had prepared it hours ago. The convoy left the garage like black wolves. 8 matte SUVs, 2 armored vans, 3 drones overhead running dark until the last second. Melinda rode shotgun in the lead vehicle, Vernon driving because no one else was steady enough tonight. The city blurred past in streaks of wet neon. Red Hook at 2:13 a.m. was a graveyard of rusted cranes and broken windows. The canning plant squatted on the water like a rotting tooth, half its roof collapsed, the other half lit from within by portable floods. Red lotus banners, crimson lotus petals on black hung from the loading docks like war flags. Vernon killed the headlights 2 blocks out. The drones went hot. He leaned over, voice low in her ear. Thermal shows 4 on the roof, 8 on the doors, the rest inside. Mateo is sublevel, northwest corner. They've got him in what used to be cold storage. Melinda's fingers whitened on the Glock. I'm ready. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded once. The night exploded. Drones dropped flashbangs through skylights. The first explosion lit the sky white. Vernon's men breached from 3 sides at once, doors blown inward, windows repelled, suppressors coughing in perfect rhythm. Melinda ran behind Vernon, his shadow, heart hammering so hard she tasted metal. Inside was chaos and hellfire. Gunfire stitched the air. Men screamed in languages she didn't know and then didn't scream anymore. Vernon moved like something born for this, every step precise, every bullet placed center mass or between eyes. He didn't shout orders, he didn't need to. His soldiers flowed around him like water around stone. Melinda fired twice, once to drop a man raising an AK at Vernon's back, once to keep moving. The recoil shocked up her arms, but her hands stayed steady. They fought down corroded metal stairs, through corridors that stank of fish and blood and rust. Bodies fell behind them. Someone tried to surrender. Vernon shot him in the face without breaking stride. At the bottom level, the air turned freezer cold. Breath fogged. The last door was steel, padlocked from the outside, like a tomb. Vernon didn't slow. He put 3 rounds into the lock, kicked it open, and stepped into the dark. The Red Lotus lieutenant waited in the center of the room, 50 years old, dragon tattoos crawling up his neck. The same man whose signature had been on the ransom note for a 4-year-old Kai 23 years ago. He held a .38 to Mateo's head. The boy was on a bare mattress, wrapped in a filthy blanket, face streaked with tears and snot. When he saw Vernon, he let out a broken sob. Uncle Vern. Everything stopped. Vernon's gun never wavered, but something catastrophic happened behind his eyes. The little voice Gege, Uncle Vernon, spoken in the same broken Cantonese accent Kai had used at 4 years old, shattered the last piece of him that had still been human. The lieutenant smiled with gold teeth. One more step and the boy loses the back of his skull. Vernon answered in Cantonese, voice gentle, almost conversational. You took my brother once. You will not take my son. He fired. The bullet entered just above the man's left eye and exited in a red mist. The body dropped straight down, dead before it hit concrete. The .38 clattered away harmless. Mateo screamed. Vernon crossed the room in 2 strides, holstered his weapon, and scooped the child up like he weighed nothing. Mateo's small arms locked around his neck hard enough to choke, legs wrapping his waist, whole body shaking with sobs. I got you. Vernon whispered over and over, one hand cradling the curls, the other pressed between narrow shoulder blades. I have you, Bao. Never again. Melinda reached them a heartbeat later. She was crying so hard she couldn't see, couldn't breathe, could only fall to her knees and pull them both into her arms. Vernon sank down with them, still holding Mateo, and wrapped his free arm around her so tightly her ribs creaked. The 3 of them knelt in a puddle of someone else's blood and held on like the world was ending. Around them, the building burned. Vernon's men were torching anything that could hold evidence. Smoke curled down the stairs, sirens wailed in the distance. Too late, always too late. Mateo's sobs finally slowed to hiccups. He pulled back just enough to look at Vernon with enormous, wet eyes. You came, he whispered, as if it were a miracle. Vernon's voice broke completely. Always. They walked out through fire. The night sky was red with reflected flames. Vernon carried Mateo against his chest, Melinda tucked under his other arm, his soldiers forming a silent honor guard. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. Back in the penthouse, dawn was a thin bruise on the horizon. Mateo had fallen asleep in the bathtub, surrounded by bubbles and every toy Vernon owned, exhaustion finally winning. Melinda had washed the blood from his curls herself, singing broken lullabies until her voice gave out. Now the boy slept in the new nursery walls painted midnight blue with glow in the dark stars, a nightlight shaped like a dragon. The door was open 6 inches, exactly how he liked it. Vernon stood in the doorway watching him breathe, still in the smoke-smelling tactical pants, shirt long gone. Melinda came up behind him, slipped her arms around his waist, and rested her cheek between his shoulder blades. She could feel the tremor that hadn't left him since the canning plant. "He's safe," she whispered. Vernon turned in her arms, cupped her face with hands that still smelled of cordite and gun oil. "I need to tell you something," he said, voice raw. "And you need to hear all of it before you decide what comes next." She waited. "I didn't keep you that night in the café because I felt sorry for you." His thumbs stroked her cheekbones like he was memorizing the shape of her. "I kept you because the second you walked in holding him wet, exhausted, ready to fight the world with your bare hands. I looked at Mateo and saw Kai alive again. And I looked at you and knew I would burn cities to keep you both breathing." His eyes searched hers, ancient and terrified. "I am not a good man, Melinda. I have done things that would make you sick. I will do them again if anyone ever looks at either of you wrong. But I need you to understand I didn't save you out of pity. I saved you because losing you would kill the last piece of me that Kai left behind. You and that little boy are the only light I have ever been selfish enough to keep." Tears slipped down her face, silent. "Tell me to let you go," he whispered. "Tell me once, and I will put you on a plane tomorrow with enough money to disappear forever. I will never follow. I swear it on my brother's grave." Melinda rose on her toes and kissed him slow, deliberate, tasting salt and smoke and gunpowder and home. "I'm not going anywhere," she said against his mouth. "You told me the night we met that I wasn't leaving after. You were right." Vernon made a broken sound and lifted her off her feet, carrying her out of the nursery and into their bedroom. He laid her down like she was made of glass, then followed her down, covering her body with his own. Outside, the city woke up to headlines about a gang war that had ended in fire and bodies no one would ever claim. Inside, Vernon Wang held the 2 people who had rebuilt his shattered soul, and for the first time in 23 years, he slept without dreaming of a little boy lost in a market crowd. Much later, when the sky had gone rose gold and Mateo's laughter echoed from the kitchen where Chen was making pancakes into dinosaur shapes, Vernon pulled Melinda against his chest on the wide couch. Mateo climbed up between them, sticky with syrup, and burrowed in. Vernon pressed his face into her hair and spoke so only she could hear. "You asked if you could sit," he murmured, lips brushing her temple. "I told you that you weren't leaving after." He tightened his arms around both of them, mother and child, heartbeat and salvation. "Now you see, I meant it." Melinda turned her face into his neck, breathed him in cedar and smoke and safety, and smiled. Outside, the city moved on, dangerous and glittering. Inside, a dragon curled protectively around the only treasure he had ever claimed.